my name is Yen. I'm based at SOAS, University of London. SOAS stands for the School of Oriental and African Studies. It is my pleasure to take part, although virtually, again, this year. I had such a wonderful time last year, so I'm a little bit jealous of all of you who've made it this year. Today I'm going to talk about a study that I carried out with Professor Park. Just move on to the next slide. The question that we set out to explore was whether and how and to what extent data mined from Facebook can help us make a better sense of what's going on in an election. For that, we chose to look at two Seoul mayoral elections, one back in 2011 and one earlier this year. The 2011 election was a by-election which took place after the then sitting mayor left rather abruptly in protest against the universal provision of free school meals. So basically his argument was that free lunch should be limited to poor kids. I'm doing the air quotation mark here. So following that departure, human rights lawyer and activist Park Won-soon and the candidate of the ruling Conservative Party, Na, they ran for the post, and Park eventually won the race. I believe Han is there, so if you'd like, he could tell you more about what happened and why we thought that election was particularly interesting. It made an interesting case to look at and study, but basically our rationale was threefold. First, why we were attracted by this particular case. The first reason was the integral role that the internet has been playing in political life in Korea. So that was something that we had in mind. And secondly, for the first time, the election had a very clear debate formed along the lines of class and class interests. The first time in the Korean context, so that was something that attracted us. And the third reason was Facebook, among other international social networking platforms, is an increasingly important space for political expressions in Korea, and particularly concerning the generation of younger and less determined voters. So again, that was something that we wanted to look further into. So I put together some of the slides here for your reference later on, but in the interest of time, I will kind of turbo through all these slides. So what did we do? We retrieved the Facebook content using search query 서울시장, meaning Seoul Mayor, in Bing in 2011. We used that particular search engine because of, at that time, for its lesser known feature called the social search, and it worked rather nicely with Facebook at that time. So this table summarizes the amount of data we retrieved and worked on that year. In 2014, however, we used Google this time because there had been some changes to that social search feature of Bing, so it didn't quite, it was no longer as effective for our research. So this time, and also that's another story, but we also looked at other platforms a little bit as well. So Google was a better choice for us. But still we used the same query term, and this time because the time span was a little bit shorter, so we collected every day instead of with the 5-day interval like last time. And we also kept search results at 100, and again the same URLs and words extracted from the titles, leads, and the meta text of each entry were collected. We then first looked at what kind of words feature most frequently and concurrently. So what kind of words kind of feature together with any other sets of words. So the words and word pairs were the first thing that we looked at. And not only that, we also calculated the z-values to see whether any changes in those frequencies are actually statistically meaningful. So for that, we used a software package called the Wordige. So that's I marked in that slide there. And also we also saw what kind of networks were formed in the text. So in 2011, we extracted all the names, people's names, and then see what kind of networks are formed. In 2014, we also threw in key issues of the election to the map and see how the network evolved. For those, we used Quick and NodeXL. I will get into a little more detail in a bit. And the process was guided and complemented by qualitative examination. So now this table shows how often candidate park, that's the circle oval shaped circle around the words, so that's park, and that's the conservative candidate, how they featured. You see an upward pattern here in both cases. Like I said, we also calculated z-values to assess the statistical significance, and as you can see, so let's go back to the table here, the table that we just saw, and then I marked the changes that were statistically significant for easy read there for you. And then we applied the same process basically to word pairs as well to see the type of words that appear together. Again, showing a similarly upward pattern here, and NAS presence, so that's the purple squarely thing there. I don't know whether you can see October 11, October 21st, and October 26th. Her presence was kind of taking off rather late and doing all right towards the end, but didn't really catch up eventually. And what was most interesting for us here is that Park was more strongly associated with the title lawyer earlier. That's the yellow cell marked in yellow, but that kind of faded out, while Park and Seoul Mayor as a word pair were kind of starting to gain more recognition. Again, basically just showing what the scores were like. Let's move on to the name network. So we also mapped a network of all names in the data collected based on their co-occurrences. And Park was, in this map, Park was initially linked with the various contenders from the liberal side, or rather non-conservative side. That was partly because the Democratic Party, as a main opposition party, was kind of struggling to come up with a strong candidate at that time. And also there was An. It's difficult to point there, so that's under the word 1st October, that is An. So he was the CEO of a software company and a university professor. Again, so he was coming from outside the political arena. He eventually decided not to run in this particular election and endorsed the Park instead, but he was also quite a force to be reckoned with at that time, up to that point. And then the network evolves. And if you look at here, so that's second last map. You will, so towards the end of towards the election day, you are now seeing Park having a very strong connection, so link with Na. So they are now starting to have the strongest link there, and the rest are kind of starting to settle down. And eventually, on the election day, the network is kind of really settled down around the Park, and the Park with the Park as a kind of a concentration point. So all was kind of indicating Park's strong presence, strong dominance in the election, and that matched with the electoral results and what was happening in the election. However, in 2014, the methodological approach that we applied earlier, just now, did not quite seem to have a similar level of explanatory or anticipatory power. And we listed some of the reasons that we identified why that was the case. And first, authorship. So the sources were a lot more diversified than in 2011, and we were seeing a lot more strategic input from candidates or their supporters than earlier. But most importantly, it was Park's incumbency. So Park was already the sitting mayor, and that was not only that. So he had a very strong ground. Also, in terms of analysis, his name was naturally popping up with the word Seoul mayor a lot more than his opponent Chung this time. So we had to tweak our research design a little bit. So this time we relied a lot more on our network analysis, and this time we expanded our network analysis further to incorporate you basically throw in key issues of the election to the map and see how map actually behaves. So unlike what we saw in 2011, Park had a clear dominance over the whole network to start with, and particularly over almost all key issues. So basically here that white squares are issues. So tuition fees, Seoul Metro, school meals, etc. All those issues where he had. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean positive. There was an accident, metro accident, and that's one of the reasons why his name was mentioned a lot with the word metro. But again, he showed very positive after the fact management. So that's one of the things that, so all the issues that you are seeing on your left, again, Park is having a clear dominance there. But as time went by, the network became quite messier, and it's now you see it's more of a tug of war between the two candidates. And in the end, though, so that's the last day of our data collection, and now you see the network is now settled more in favor of Park, a bit like what we saw earlier. And one more thing, I'm not sure if you can see it clearly from where you are sitting. The small circle on top right, Kang Nan-hee, that's Park's wife, who wasn't really seen in public much, and Chung, the opponent, and his supporters were really kind of not giving a rest to that. they were really kind of attacking that point. There were a lot of rumors going around about why she's hiding, or if she's hiding at all, and if that's the case, why, etc., etc. But in this last network, finally, he is in this last network visualization, you see Chung is finally let go of that. So what does all this tell us? So yes, the data were in fact indicative of what was happening and what was going to happen in the elections and the study in both cases. So in that sense, our findings contribute to the recent literature on the computational turn in gauging public opinion. You know, big data, semantic polling, Nate Silver phenomenon, you know, whole statistical prediction, Obama's big data campaign, etc., etc. However, at the same time, our study also highlights what Tveksky calls the need for qualitative pull-out when dealing with big data from social media. So you can't really, you really have to be alerted when it comes to dealing with big data. You can't just simply rely on, you know, computational calculations. You actually have to be very qualitatively approach to the data while doing all that. And so now from this moment on, we would like to see whether this approach actually work on other platforms, or is it just a Facebook? Was it a coincidence, or is it you know, is it actually a valid way to assess? And we would like to see even, you know, not just different platforms, or even in different political cultural contexts. So that's all I've got to say. Do let us know if you have any questions. Either you ask Han, or I'm quite good with the emails myself as well. So do let me know. Do let us know if you have any questions about this study. Thank you.